Pendulum, a mechanic that is just so fun and so entertaining that only one person on the entire planet actually plays it.
Investment! Let's go!
So for those of you that have been watching my channel for quite a while now, you'll know that my opinion on Pendulum isn't exactly the greatest. If I was going to rate all the summoning mechanics, I'd probably put Xyz first, then maybe Link, Ritual, Fusion, Synchro. Pendulum. I just find the mechanic to be just so convoluted and overloaded with just random ass mechanics, where if you don't have just 2 trillion hours in the mechanic, you will just have no idea what's going on half the time. Even only yesterday, I came across DDD Divisor King, which I'm pretty familiar with, so I grabbed my Pendulum card and I placed it in the Pendulum scale. It proceeded to suck it up. This is a monster that, when you activate a monster's effect, the card will suck the card up and place it underneath it as material. So by placing a card in my spell and trap card zone, I apparently had activated a monster's effect. But seeing 2 players being able to reach the top 100 playing only Pendulum during the Duelist Cup has inspired me to actually try and give this mechanic another go. As to be fair, I haven't played that many different Pendulum deck lists, so I decided, why not, I'll give it another shot. So I went onto Master Duel Meta, scrolled through a few deck lists until I found a nice looking Pendulum deck and just decided, fuck it, I'll give it a go. I regret my decision. So here's today's deck list. Now just a reminder before I go through the deck list, if you're enjoying today's content and want to see more videos just like this one in the future, make sure to let me know, leave a like on today's video and considering subscribing to the channel down below. Especially if you want to see me play some more weird or wacky archetypes just like this one in the future, make sure to let me know down below. Alright, let's get into today's deck list. So today's deck list is based around Amorphage, which is quite possibly the worst archetype I've ever had to play in Yu-Gi-Oh! So for those of you that have never actually heard of this archetype before, which, let's be honest, is probably just about every single person watching this video, this archetype is basically just a bunch of floodgates. Only the floodgates like to pop themselves at the start of your turn. So this archetype is based around just a ton of Pendulum monsters that all have the same monster effect. If this card is Pendulum summoned or flip face up, neither player can special summon monsters from their extra deck while this card is face up on the field, except Amorphage monsters, which in theory sounds like a pretty busted effect, as looking at your opponent using any card in their extra deck just kills off a lot of decks instantly. But then you realise this card has 1850 defense. Alright, this one has 1350. So, I mean, maybe they get a bit stronger than the next one at 1950. I mean, surely the next one won't be any weaker, right? 0 attack. I mean, surely they get stronger, right? Like, the next one's gonna be bigger. It's 16. You kind of get the picture here. You're activating all these floodgates that when your opponent activates their adventurer token, it just beats over it most of the time. And even if it doesn't, they just equip the equip spell and remove it that way anyway. Yeah. The Pendulum cards actually do get stronger, such as when we move into my boy Sloth over here, or my boy Goliath. But then you realise these cards are level 6 and level 8. And if we go through the archetype again and we look at the scales, 5, 5, 3, 5. Yet you actually can't Pendulum summon these guys with their own archetype. Imagine that, they released a bunch of cards including some boss monsters, and you literally can't summon them in their own archetype. That's the state of the archetype I'm trying to make work here. Now what's going to make this archetype sound even more ridiculous is when you take into account the lower scale of this deck is 3. So I just mentioned you can't summon the big boys because the highest scale is 5. Well, it turns out you can't even summon the small boys either because the lowest scale is 3. So you have a bunch of monsters in your deck that say if this card is Pendulum summoned, they get their effect. when their own archetype literally can't even pendulum summon them. Now before I keep bagging on this archetype too much, we do have to go through the actual most important part about these monster cards, and that is their pendulum effects. So each of your monsters has a separate pendulum effect that are all very similar, and they all just act as floodgates to stop your opponent doing certain things. For example, Gluttony, while you control an Amorphage monster, stops your opponent activating monster effects, except Amorphage monsters. Similarly, you have your Lechery, does the exact same thing, but it stops the players activating spell cards. Same thing, you have Greed, stops trap cards. You have cards like Envy, which stops chain link 2s. You have cards like Wrath, which stops your opponent being able to tribute monsters. Pride stops burn effects, and so forth, all different floodgate style effects. Now, each of these would sound pretty damn, actually really damn insane. Like, your opponent just can't get through a board of being able to activate no trap cards, be able to activate no spell cards, can't activate monster effects. Sounds pretty damn insane, right? But then you keep reading. Once per turn during your standby phase, tribute one monster or destroy this card. Yet they tribute themselves, and that goes for each of your pendulum scales. So at the start of your turn, both your pendulum scales are going to nuke themselves. This deck list is so hard to get working. Now, to be fair to this archetype, it probably wasn't this bad in the past when we had previous master rules. It's just that the current master rules make it so hard to get this deck working, because obviously since it's a pendulum deck, the whole point is even though your scales are going to nuke themselves, you can offset that by tributing monsters instead, and because it's a pendulum deck, you can just revive those monsters straight from the extra deck by pendulum summoning. If only we weren't under a master rule that lets you basically only summon one back per turn, so you're guaranteed going to be popping one of your scales nearly every turn, or losing an extra monster every single turn. Now also to help offset that, we have Amorphage Infection, which is actually a really strong card for the deck, as it kind of helps with both the problems the deck faces, the low attack stats, low defense stats, and the fact that both your scales are trying to commit seppuku every single turn. So Amorphage Infection makes all your monsters on the field gain 100 attack and defense for each Amorphage card on the field. On top of that, whenever one of your cards is tributed or destroy a battle or card effect, you can add one Amorphage card from your deck to your hand. So this card is basically the deck's saving grace and just completely solves any of the problems the deck faces. Too bad it's not searchable, and the archetype has 0 draw in it. So if you don't get a hold of this card, your duels are going to just be really hard. Also, not to mention, this deck list doesn't have a going second play. Your biggest monster inside of the archetype is going to be 2750 attack, and you can't even summon it without doing some ridiculous tribute summoning plays. In other words, this archetype can't go second, as if your opponent summons a monster with like 2500 attack, most of the time, that's just too much attack for you to deal with. An Adventurer token, just the token with 2000 attack, a lot of the time, you just won't be able to beat over that. The rest of the cards in this deck list are all designed to try to help with the flaws the actual archetype faces. So we have the cards that are designed to go second, which are cards like Maxx and cards like the Winged Dragon of Ra Sphere mode. Now you notice I'm not running any other hand traps in here, it's because generally it's kind of pointless having an Imperm or having a, Ash Blossom, when those two cards don't win you the game on the spot, because if your opponent even summons one monster with 2000 attack, you're going to struggle. So we're running only cards going second that will win you the game on the spot. So your Sphere mode, which hopefully distributes everything your opponent has, and your Maxx, which hopefully just gets your opponent to pass the turn back to you without doing a whole lot. Then you can actually play the game as if you're going first. Then we have cards like your Odd Eyes package. Now the Odd Eyes package is really strong in this, purely because 1, these cards have 0 scale and this card has 12 scales, so that covers for the really shitty scales I was talking about earlier, so you can actually summon out your big boys easily. Also, your Odd Eyes Reveloution Dragon is a card that you can discard from your hand by paying 500 life points to search for any Dragon Pendulum monster, which is literally every single card in this deck. And on top of that, we have a nice little field spell, which can search for it. So we essentially have 2 ways to help search for basically any other card in the deck. On top of that, we have a few other draw spells, because like I mentioned, this archetype has literally 0 draw in it, outside of your Amorphage Infection. Alright guys, that's going to do it for the decklist portion of the video. The rest of the video will be gameplay showcasing the decklist in action, and without further ado, let's get into it. Alright, so today I have 3 replays to share with you guys, all of which were taken from was actually a surprisingly decent run in Diamond, where I went from Diamond 5 all the way to Diamond 4. I know, that's a pretty decent run. But to be fair, for this deck to actually go up a singular rank was very impressive to me anyway, even if it did take an embarrassingly long amount of time. Anyway, let's get into the actual replays. So all these replays aren't going to be showing off anything too extraordinary, anything that great, but then again, this deck doesn't really do anything that extraordinary anyway. I just tried to show a few replays where I did a few different things to try to make the replays actually look a little bit different. Because this deck is basically just the same thing every game anyway. Alright, so first thing I did, activate Pour of Prosperity to try and look through my deck for something strong. You'll notice I'm actually only running 1 pot because I'm trying to abide by the ban list coming up. He activates Maxx, we don't care about that, we only do 1 special summon a turn anyway. Adding a Greed, giving myself a nice little scale. So activating my Amorphage Infection, getting my Sky Iris. This is because if I get a monster on board, I can then use my Sky Iris to pop that to search for one of my Odd Eyes cards, and because I destroyed a monster on the field, my Infection goes off, so I get 2 searches this way. Getting my Reveloution so I can discard it for a search. Adding my Sloth, so now I have a scale 5 and a scale 3, one that's going to stop spell cards and one that's going to stop my opponent adding cards to hand. Pendulum summoning a bunch of monsters. Now, don't see this board and think, wow, that's a pretty decent board. What were you talking about before? This is a rare occasion. You generally end on only 1 monster, and I'm not kidding. You generally only end on 1 monster. So, this was a pretty decent hand and a fat ton of monsters. My opponent can't summon monster in his extra deck, locked out of searching cards, and my opponent, can't activate spell cards either. Sets some cards and passes. Now my effects go off trying to tribute themselves. Stupidly, I actually activate this card's effect, well, to protect itself, meaning I can't use my Sky Iris for a search this turn. Also, I used this card's effect to tribute this monster, meaning I can't actually pendulum summon anything back because my 1 extra deck zone is locked up. Yeah, be careful with this deck, there's a lot of dumb little misplays you can do that are all based around it being dumb and actually contradicting itself. So I just set 1 pass. Alright, he summons out his Cypherame Driver, sorry. Does destroy a card though, so I get a search, grabbing Goliath. This time I don't make the mistake of keeping this card on the board, and I pop it. So now I can actually use my Sky Iris, without just being completely cucked. Adding my Reveloution Dragon for a big scale, so I can finally summon out my big boss monsters. And from here, we just have a really stacked board that my opponent can't really play through, and he's gone. Well, after trying to do some adventurous stuff for some reason. Not really sure what he was trying to go for here. Summons out some big dude, gets a hold of a thing that returns one of my cards to hand. Summons his little Destiny Hero guy, which, yeah, he's not doing anything. Either way. Moving on to replay number 2. Alright. So was this the replay I went second? I think it was. This is the Eldritch replay. This is one of the rare going second W's this deck actually got. It's actually possible. So my opponent activating his Pot of Extravagance, then setting, I think, 4 cards, and passing the turn. So all we want to do here is get a hold of our anti-trap card, and just get that on the field and get a monster on the field. So putting our Terraforming, grabbing our Sky Iris to thin the deck a bit. Same combo you saw before, we're going to be tributing this card, we use this card to search 2 cards. Opponent activates a Goes in Match, which is a bit annoying. Well, would be if we were an archetype of just all dragons. Oh, sorry, all dragons and all earth monsters, sorry. It goes and mixed up with the other one, the other floodgate. Alright, getting our Lechery, making sure we search for our Greed, getting a monster on board, and now we have a monster on board and Greed. My opponent can't activate any trap cards whatsoever. But you'll notice, I actually only have 1 monster, and that is it. That's literally it. If my opponent had the Eldritch that was able to just discard a card from hand to remove this from the field, I would lose the game instantly, as it would have turned off both my floodgates. Now, you'd also notice I had to actually pop my 1 monster to keep the floodgate on the board, which means now there's no monster on board, my opponent can activate their trap cards. So yeah, another pretty big downside you'll notice. If you only have one monster on board and you need it to protect your floodgates, you give your opponent a nice little window where they can activate their card effects again. Thankfully, you only have one trap card to activate, and we can max C for one card draw. We get a hold of one really powerful card versus Eldritch. We've got a Goliath, so we have anti-trap and any card is banished. This card, so like, I didn't actually mention this card during the decklist portion. This card, any card my opponent sends to the graveyard is banished instead, so, yeah. Any card sent to the graveyard, yeah. Except my Amorphage cards, of course. Gets a hold of a big boss monster dude. He can't really do a whole lot because he needs to actually activate a trap card to summon this. So make sure the only card I need on board is this card, so it's the only one I protect. Search for my second Goliath, so I can have the Goliath effect active again. Pendulum summon my dude back, and start beating it into my opponent, and he's gone. Alright, a rare going second W, probably the only one you'll ever see. Alright, final game. Alright. So this was verse, I think... Not verse, it was verse the, I forgot the name of it. The Herald deck, the one that's trying to summon the big negate dudes. But we went first, and we have a lot of floodgates, so we're good to go. You also notice that every single one of these replays I had Infection, so... Yeah, this deck isn't very good without Infection, I'm going to be honest, so just hope you draw this card or Prosperity to draw into it. Opponent activates his annoying negate, popping my Joker. I think it's Joker, looks like a Joker. Sky Iris, popping the card. For some reason, I didn't normal summon it, so actually... Oh no, because I used Joker's normal summon, of course. So only getting one search, sadly. Do get a hold of Sloth, though. Activate my Lechery, so my opponent can't add cards to hand, and my opponent can't activate spell cards. So I searched for these two in particular because I knew what my opponent was playing. These are generally the best ones to search for anyway, because if your opponent can't activate spell cards, the likelihood they're able to out your floodgates is pretty damn low. So I like to search for the anti-spell, and I like to search for this one pretty often. Although this one is very good versus this particular archetype anyway. The Drytron archetype, because this deck likes to search a shit ton throughout their turn, so blocking that is pretty good. Opponent normal summons Ash Blossom. I think he was trying to go into a Crystron Halki Firebrax or something here. Didn't realize he's blocked out of extra deck using my Envy. And he concedes from there. Alright, so that's going to do it for today's replays. I hope you guys enjoyed them. If you did, remember to leave a like, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, thank you guys for watching. Hope to see you in the next one. Laters.
Hey, big brother, can I watch SpongeBob?
Shut up, Mokuba. I'm busy flagging YouTube videos to compensate for the fact that I have an extremely small penis.
Oh.